RFK Jr. now just came out in an interview talking about the new food guidelines that'll be coming out. And part of what he talked about is back in my day, we ate way more saturated fat and we were way healthier. And we're about to have that conversation. And
So is
so,
that true?
is that true? And I think it's super important as we kind of break this all down. What did he actually say? And what is the context of it? Because we do live in a nasty situation where I'm going to be frankly clear. I think RFK Jr. on the extreme majority of talking points are just bad points. However, not everyone is purely bad and not everyone is purely good. And what happens so much when you're politicizing things, people take things out of context. So we tried to really do our due diligence in this episode of making sure we quoted him for exactly what he said current as of late, so we're not talking points that he didn't actually say.
Correct. And I think it's interesting because you brought this whole topic up to me just a couple of days ago. You said, did you hear what RFK said about saturated fat? And I hadn't yet. And so I looked and I was trying to figure out what did he actually say. And it wasn't like there was this one moment where he said, the Americans should eat more saturated fat. Like he didn't say that per se, but there was this whole, I mean, all these different points going back actually a couple months about different things that he's said about, like you mentioned, new guidelines coming out for Americans' nutrition and how saturated fat is a part of that.
Yes. And I want to preface this whole conversation starting point. People love to poke holes in what the FDA and what the government officials talk about as the standard of practice for how an American should eat for their health. I don't know. It's weird that I have to say this. No one follows guidelines.
100%.
So before we even dive into what the guidelines should or shouldn't be, anyone who compares them back to what the current health of the average American is, no one's following guidelines, people. So
Right.
before we even kind of dive into this, anyone who's saying, well, look how bad America's health is, no one is following the guidelines.
Right. So he's going to come out with new guidelines, but I think your point is super important to note that yes, there are currently guidelines out there. Does anyone ever look at these guidelines, do you think?
No.
So did you happen to look them up for this podcast? Because I did. And I've looked at them before.
Which guidelines?
So there's the 2020 to 2021 Dietary Guidelines for Americans. So these come out every 5 years.
Okay.
Every 5 years, there's a group of people that look at the data. So this is a group of 20 plus nationally recognized people, researchers, scientists, doctors who look into the data and they come up with these dietary guidelines for America. And they redo these every 5 years because, there's new research that comes out.
Adjusts.
I know, it's amazing, right? And so there are guidelines out there. I looked them up yesterday and the current guidelines are, I think I saw a PDF of about 163 pages.
Hello.
So it's a massive book of guidelines. And I do think one thing RFK said was that he wanted new guidelines to come out that weren't so bloated so that it was not probably 163 pages, which I can respect that. However, I think your point is valid that there's a lot of good stuff in the current guidelines if you go look at it. But what percentage of Americans are following those guidelines? And if RFK comes out with new ones, is that going to make any difference?
It's so interesting because, as we kind of unpack that, we'll listen to who they trust and respect. Since so much of the general consensus is no one trusts the FDA, if it's coming from the powers that be, not going to happen. It's so interesting because, who are they from? I would assume it's HSS. Health and Human Services. Yeah. So I mean, it's going to be the people that believe in what RFK stands for are going to listen to him, and they're probably already doing these things. And then the people that don't listen to him
aren't going to.
So I don't think it's going to
change. Is it not
that.
going to change anything, you think?
It's like we talked about that earlier on that last walk, which is, does the powers that be actually move the needle on people's decision making? And I argue no. People who want to listen to a certain behavior, most people are not hey, let me look at what the established professionals are saying and I will adjust to what they say. It's either you fall on this side or you fall on this side, and it's I'm going to listen to this group no matter what people say or do.
If they say something that is what I'm doing and want to be doing,
Yep.
I'm going to
I'm just
follow
going to do it.
them.
And there's not a lot of people, I hate to say it, that are like, I'm just going to listen to professionals and yeah, I don't buy it. But so I want to go through a couple quotes that he went through so we can kind of break it all down. So one of the things he didn't necessarily say this at like very recently, but I think this is July, which was we're going to end the 50-year war on natural saturated fat. We were talking about ultra processed foods and fiber, things we have not talked about in the past. Was a transcript, and so it's so funny because it's like this automatically just starts off with this classic rhetoric, which is the appeal to nature fallacy. Like, just because we did something that if something's natural, it's inherently not harmful. And if it's unnatural, it's inherently bad for you. Like, this is the constant rhetoric of poorly educated people say, like, oh, well, it's been around for thousands of years, so it's good for you. Like, it can't be bad for you. And I find this this topic, it's very similar to, I want to find this other quote that kind of goes with it. Yeah, I mean, the saturated fat war starts with Ansel Keys, blah, 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 blah. And everyone, all the carnivores bring all this stuff up.
But I do think the historical context is important to say, how did we get here?
Yep. You want to bring that up?
Yeah, and I think it seems like the initial push towards being worried about saturated fat and animal fat did kind of start in the middle of last century with Ansel Keys coming out with research about certain populations and the fact that where they were eating less saturated fat, they had less mortality and heart disease and so forth. And there's debate on how good his research was.
He did leave out 2 or 3 cohorts of people that challenged that rhetoric.
So, I mean, his research was not perfect, but it kind of is where this all started. And then in the 60s and 70s, it started kind of this low fat craze started, and then fat was being replaced with carbs and sugar. Then we got to the 80s and 90s, and everything was fat free, and people were eating way too many just white carbs and sugar. And so then all of a sudden we get to the 2000s and people are going keto and paleo, and now it's going carnivore. So it's constantly changing, which I find fascinating.
And that's like when you start getting caught up in diet culture, the pendulum swings so much. And that's where like one of the annoyances I have with the rhetoric of RFK on this process is there's enough clear data on the overconsumption of saturated fat being bad for you that it's undeniable. Now, there have been new studies done as of late that put into the question veganism and this idea that you have to eliminate saturated fat in order to limit or eliminate atherosclerotic risk of cardiovascular disease and all that kind of stuff. And like currently, the American Heart Association says 6% of total calories in saturated fat.
No more than.
No more than. It used to be 10. They've pulled it down a little bit. But
because I think the guidelines say 10%. The Heart Association says 6. So they're a little bit just more stringent on it.
Yeah, which would make sense.
It is. It does.
And so, but like the funny part to me is it is true that there has been a war on fat in like the 80s and 90s. And everything went to carbs and sugars and everything was low fat, fat free. And we've talked about this on earlier episodes talking about macronutrients. There is a hierarchy of clinical evidence for macros. Like number 1, it's protein. Number 2, it's fats. And number 3, it's carbs. It's not that carbs are bad for you. They're just the least essential because your body can manufacture sugar as needed, where there's a base level fat you do need in your diet in order to do some hormonal regulation, vitamin and mineral uptake, all this kind of stuff. But unpacking that, you just sound so ignorant when you talk about saturated fat instead of actually going like, you know what? You need to consume more omega-3 fatty acids. If he would have said that, I'd have been like, respect. Yeah, tell people to eat more sardines, more fatty fish, more salmon, more olive oil, and be careful of how much simple carbs you're consuming. Fine.
That's something I don't like is why it's like he's focused on this one. He brings up one specific food group and like that's all he says. And I'm like, that is not in and of itself the only problem with the American diet.
Yeah. And it still also hits his fundamental, which is he objectively and completely wrong believes seed oils is bad for you. So of course he's going to say eat more saturated
Right.
fat because, well, seed oils are so bad for you. So you got to eat saturated fat. And it's like the fact that that's the duality is hysterical to me because that's not all the types of fats you can consume. And like it is still so funny to me that we're having this discussion between saturated fat and seed oils when objectively no one questions that omega-3 fatty acids are the best thing for you. And so it's like, why are we even having this trivial discussion between saturated fats and seed oils and omega-6s when it's like, eat more omega-3s?
Because it seems like Americans, all we want to talk about in terms of diet is all the things that we're not supposed to be eating. That's all anyone ever focuses on. Well, not anyone, but like I'm making hyperbole here. But I think that I always do try to lean on, let's focus on the things that we should be eating, the things that we want more of. Instead of always talking about removing things, let's talk about, okay, we need and should be eating these things as opposed to stop eating all these terrible things for you, because I think that's a part of the problem of why people struggle with nutrition is they don't know what they're supposed to be eating or not.
And they just sit there and create this, they're just afraid of everything. Now, it's always interesting too, because like part of this whole rhetoric, and it talks about how RFK always talks about how we were in such better health and stuff back in the 50s and 60s, blah, 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 blah. And from an obesity lens, yeah, you can make that argument. But it is so funny to me because considering I've dealt with the carnivore community, the keto community, who in and of themselves have to argue that saturated fat doesn't matter and LDL cholesterol doesn't matter when the clinical research is extremely clear. It matters. It's not the only thing that matters, but it is undeniable. But what's funny to me in this whole rhetoric is heart disease is still the number one killer in America, in the world, I would assume. I don't know what the world data is, but America it is.
I don't think it's in the world, but it is in the US.
And when you unpack that, it's so funny to me because people just keep talking about, they say heart disease is worse now than it was 50 to 70 years ago. And it's empirically untrue. Incidence rates and per capita incidence rates and per capita mortality was over double what it is today. The amount of people dying from cardiovascular disease in their 40s and 50s is extremely more rare than it was back in the 60s and 70s. Now, again, I want to kind of break that all down. Yes, it has to do with we discovered like different interventions, stents, and what my dad did, and interventions with angioplasty and all that kind of stuff.
Better medical therapy,
Statin medications, all this kind of stuff. That all matters. But when people say, well, heart disease was it was barely a thing 50, 70 years ago, there's nothing to back that up. Nothing. So it's so frustrating to me because it's like that's a simple Google search away to just see incidence rates and mortality were per capita over double what they are today.
And the research is very clear that if you eat more saturated fat, you will have higher levels of LDL cholesterol. And we know that LDL cholesterol is a risk for atherogenic plaques, which lead to heart disease. And so I don't want people to think when RFK says eat more saturated fat that there's no risk to this. And I think that could cause a lot of harm if people aren't understanding what the research does show about that.
Goes off of what his other quotes that was one of the more similar ones today, which is so super interesting. So his quote was, he wants to move the guidelines that will stress the need to eat saturated fats from dairy. The quote is good meat or fresh meat and vegetables, and release those that will give everything the rationale of driving into the schools. And like, I always find that so funny because like when these types of people come into power, they use subjective terms like good meat, fresh meat.
That's not very helpful for most people.
It's like those are so unscientific. What's your definition of good meat? And I can almost guarantee you someone like a RFK Jr. believes grass-fed, grass-finished is better for you. Like, no, there's no data to back that up. Like,
now we shouldn't be getting our saturated fat from hot dogs and bologna. There's research to support this. And that's what I assume he's meaning by that. But I agree with you that you can't just start using the terms good and bad. And I don't think we should ever call most foods good or bad.
Exactly. And it's like, and it's so funny because it's anecdotal case study, N of one. My LDL cholesterol is 69, which is incredible. And this goes against the vegan rhetoric, which is like I eat plenty of meat, a lot, actually. I would say I
Mhm.
average a pound of meat a
You eat a
day.
lot of meat.
Yeah. I eat over a pound of meat a day. I just understand that saturated fat is one of the factors into the elevation of LDL cholesterol. And since I eat a lot of fiber and I choose lower saturated fat sources of meat, I don't have an LDL problem.
It always comes back to this that we can't look, we're talking about nutrition data and nutrition research. We cannot talk about one thing in isolation because if you're eating one thing, there's going to be other components with that. And if you replace one part of your diet with something else, that's the problem is that when we do nutrition research, you can't just take it away completely. You can't do this like okay, you people don't eat and you people do eat. Like we all have to eat. So there's always going to be something we're eating. So you can't you have to realize when you take something out of the diet, you're adding something else in.
Which then goes back to the last 30 years of diet culture, which I understand, which was when we started really leaning in on saturated fat, guess what? Everyone went fat free and they just loaded everything in
Carbs.
carbs and sugars. And they were still eating too many calories. Okay, say with me, calories. And because they're over consuming calories, it causes the cascade effect, the negative health to the body. Whether those overconsumption of calories is from simple carbohydrates and sugar, or fats, or technically even protein. It's a lot harder with protein, but you can do it. Guilty. I get fat off eating 360 grams of protein a day.
David, I think, secretly thinks that a protein bar has 10 calories.
Oh yeah, 100%. I justify in my head. In my head, since I'm like, oh, the thermogenic effect of food in this thing is way better, so I can get away with more.
Do you think we should come out with t-shirts that say calories on them?
Calories. Say it with me, people. Whether you overconsume the fats into a calorie surplus, or the carbs into a calorie surplus, or even the protein into a calorie surplus, over time it leads to problems. And it's just so funny. But this is one of the other quotes that is going to take a
Yes.
lot to unpack because again, off the rip, I hate this type of narrative, which is one of and I have friends that believe in this too. And again, dosage makes the poison here, people. But one of his quotes recently: "Food makers have been permitted to mass poison American children," told lawmakers. That's wrong. It needs to end, and I believe I'm the one person who can end it.
Wow.
So you heard it. The majority of food companies are poisoning kids and ending them. What's your opinion of that?
Um, well, I think it's a bit strong. I do not personally believe that our food system is out to poison people or to make people unhealthy. I don't think there's some conspiracy in this. I think that there's a lot of different reasons that our food culture and the way our kids eat has changed. And to point to one evil enemy, I think is totally incorrect. And then to have the prideful statement saying that you think you are the only person that can fix this.
Yeah.
Like that concerns me that you think that highly of yourself.
And it's always the hubris of that one. It's funny to me. This comes from like a quote from Dad got it from, I think it was from Socrates, but it's the quote of who makes the best doctor, the fit and healthy person who's always been fit and healthy, or the person who's kind of sickly who becomes a doctor. And there's the argument that the sickly doctor is a better doctor than the doctor who's always been healthy, because there's a lot of nuance and unknowns that someone who's always been healthy never understands. My hubris, someone who was pre-diabetic, high blood pressure, obese by the time he was, I'm literally this poster child of what RFK Jr. says is bad of America from a childhood perspective. I still don't believe you should just ban these foods, or you think that like, oh yeah, Oreos in and of themselves are killing kids and all this stuff. It's just so ridiculous, because that's where we go back to the dosage makes the poison. There are people out there that eat all natural sweets because they're terrified of Hostess
Yeah.
cupcakes or whatever, but they're still considerably overweight because
That's not the answer.
That's not the answer. Like, and it doesn't actually serve anybody by just creating this villain, because it's just not that simple. While yes, on a 1 month average, how many Hostess cupcakes, cookies, Doritos, all am I eating? Not that much. But am I afraid of it? Do I think it's poison to my body?
No.
No.
And the one thing I will say, I mean, I agree with RFK on the fact that he feels like the food system for our country should change. Like I support that. I think that we do need to focus more on eating fruits and vegetables and getting whole foods and less processed foods. But the way he's going about it with these kind of comments, it's just, that's not, in my opinion, the way that it should be done.
Well, it's like I think was it Walmart just came out and said Walmart's getting rid of artificial food dyes in all their food.
Oh, yay.
Whether the Doritos use a
A
red
dye?
tomato for the dye or red
Artificial?
40, it doesn't matter. Like if you're eating like 5,000 calories of Doritos every day,
It's just not the
it just
highest yield issue.
it just doesn't matter. And this is what happens so much with these diet culture focused people, is like you're not actually serving anybody by just going, well, I'm making a difference because I'm taking out red 40 out of the Doritos. So you take the red 40 out of the Doritos and now the kids can eat Doritos?
Well, I know, I'm like, where's this research going to go in the future that like, wow, we're going to all of a sudden get way healthier in the next 5 years because there's less red food dye? I just don't think that's the case. And I think that is it's an important point that he is making a lot of these comments about apparently he's coming out with new dietary guidelines. And where is he getting his research? Because I cannot find an answer to that. Like, where is he going to show us that these dietary guidelines are coming from?
Well, he's already gotten in one scandal with the Health and Human Services where they came out with I'm trying to remember all the details, and it's not 100% quote on this, but I remember like a few months ago, Health and Human Services got under fire because they created this dossier for health.
Is this like ChatGPT?
Yes,
And then it was wrong.
No, well, because I think they must have used ChatGPT because it made fake clinical studies. Because ChatGPT, they've adjusted that, but ChatGPT had a nasty habit of if it didn't have an answer to something, it would lie. And so it lied, and Health and Human Services got caught. And so it's like, yeah, I'm really trusting the powers that be to look at the clinical research as objectively as possible.
I feel like he's just trying to say he's right. He's research. He's all of this. And it's like, well, what about all these other researchers, scientists, people that are trying to make guidelines that are working together on what we have for clinical research? Does he think those people are truly all biased, all incorrect? I just don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's someone that has a clear bias. And then we've talked about this in previous episodes. People that talk in ultimates
Get concerned.
I mean, obviously, I said earlier, LDL cholesterol causes atherosclerosis. It's very certain at this point. I mean, we have 50 years.
That's not
That's
not your opinion.
Yeah, we've had all types of study designs to prove that. Like it's not at a position where it's like, well, maybe. Well, we had this one cohort study of one group of people.
No.
It's like we're talking dozens of cohort studies, dozens of randomized controlled trials, dozens of large scale, small scale, both dietary adjustments versus pharmaceutical, all controlling for the same variable, which is LDL cholesterol, and it is consistent. There's obviously some variance to it because there are multiple things that cause atherosclerosis, but it is undeniable it causes atherosclerosis. And so it's like when you speak in ultimates like that, it's like, where's the data to back it up?
That's so important in science, is that reproducibility. If you can reproduce something over and over and again for decades, it's probably something you should pay attention to.
Full fat dairy being avoided is very strange. His quote was very strange.
You just think it's strange? I mean, I think a lot of people think I know a lot of people that think it's strange that people even drink milk.
Yeah.
People find that weird. I grew up in a culture that drinks plenty of milk, so I don't find it weird. But I know people that think, why should we be drinking milk? So I don't know why he thinks his
Yeah.
opinion on
And,
that is so
and
important.
that's always so funny to me. It's his subjective opinion of how he views health and
Right.
nutrition. Because he can do some push-ups and has abs, he's the peak authority
Hmm.
of this
Sure.
space. And it's annoying. Like, again, at the end of the day, looking at his current quotes lately on this whole saturated fat and the food pyramid and all this kind of stuff, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not like he's saying, because even at least he said vegetables.
Yeah, he has some points that are valid,
But
and
it's
that's the
just,
thing.
yeah.
It's not like everything he says is awful, but a lot of things he say are very misleading, I
It's
think,
just,
to people that don't know better.
yeah, he wants, like so many people wish it to be, they want it black and white. Vegans want you to say meat is bad for you. It's just not true. Carnivores want you to say, well, vegetables are bad for you. It's just not true. Intermittent fasters want you to say eating breakfast and eating too many frequent meals is causing a bunch of damage. It's just not true. Contextually, once you add some variables such as calories or macronutrient complex or some of these actual controlled variables, you can get some more context nuanced answers. But everyone wants simple, black and white, good and bad, and it just doesn't work that way.
And I don't know why. What is his reasoning for being so against organizations like the American Heart Association, which has completely different recommendations than what he is saying about saturated fat? Because they're the ones that have the 6%.
Conflict of interest.
Right. So, but I'm like,
That's his argument. His argument is big pharma and conflict of interest.
because I mean, if you look into some of the data, like the American Heart Association has their, what do they call it? Their presidential advisory that came out in 2017 on the recommendations for the cholesterol. And if you look into the research on that, it was a very unbiased look at the data. And so I don't know why he's thinking and claiming that it's all so biased. I'm not saying there's no bias in that, but there's bias in all the things he's saying too. The milk industry and the beef, cattle, whatever industries, they're pretty powerful.
Not small industries. Yeah, I always find that one funny to me. Like everyone talks about fixating on big food. Big Ag is no small organization. Uh, how many in the last 30 some years of living, how many milk,
A lot.
how many milk
What's for
beef,
dinner?
that's for, yeah, it's like this narrative that no, the poor meat and dairy industry, they're
Hmm.
so small and they're getting taken advantage of. They're just as big as everybody else.
No, individual farmers are small, but we're not looking at that. We're looking at the
The industry.
industry as a whole.
Yeah, and it's just, yeah, it's you sit there and you break that all down.
And if he would
It's
come
just
into this
empty.
conversation with some humility, I think I could have more respect for him. But he doesn't. He's
No.
so certain on everything he says, like he's God almost. And that's just not true.
And especially when it comes to and it's tough because again, there are certain things that he's trying to poke at that I do objectively respect.
Right.
Like for example, I understand conflict of interest exists and it is a behavior that the general population or the powers that be have created less value upon, which is he brought it up. I've had friends bring it up. I've been talking about this for years too. The fact that high level officials at the FDA or the CDC can then jump to high level C-suite positions inside of companies that they're supposed to be regulating, that's a bad look. Period. It shouldn't happen. Now, just because like fixing that hole doesn't mean the entire system is broken. Like that's an easy fix. Hey, guess what? It is now a law that you
Can't do
cannot
that.
do this. Oh, cool, done. Now, what's going to happen is, even if they made that a law, the powers that be that don't trust that group are just going to be like, well, it's not good enough. And like that's what half this stuff goes into. So you just don't like everything pharmaceutical.
Hmm.
And it's like the pharmaceutical industry does some incredible things. I mean,
It's not all bad.
you sit there and go oncology and cancer. Like we've literally helped eliminate multiple cancers from being death sentences.
Most people, when they get sick, they're okay with pharmacology.
Yeah. And so, but Are there issues with big pharma trying to profiteer? Absolutely. But it's this all or none, black and white rhetoric. And this happens again and again and again out of a lot of these people in these positions of power right now, whether it's social media driven or it is weird to me. Obviously, he got to this position. It's like, you have no medical background. You have nothing.
Is telling our kids what they should eat.
It's annoying. I mean, you can do push-ups. That's great.
The marker of health right there. But I think that is what we are always trying to do on this podcast, is to say this isn't as simple as a headline. And hopefully as people listen to this, they can get the idea that it's complicated. There's complexity to this, and it isn't black and white.
And so, like, going full circle, is there most likely going to be a more proponent support of saturated fat coming out of the Health and Human Services? Probably.
Like it.
Do I think he's going to put this narrative of, like, go carnivore? No, that's not the vibe I get. It's not. And it's naive. And technically, if you're adding a couple grams of saturated fat compared to the other things that matter, it doesn't really, it's not going to make that big of a difference. The problem is you add up, people still don't understand the fundamentals of calories. They don't understand the fundamentals of macronutrients. They don't understand the fundamentals of all these things. And telling someone to eat more saturated fat is going to make them healthier is just wild to me. Like,
it'll be interesting. Maybe, I don't know, maybe check back in a few weeks. We might do a follow-up on this.
Yeah, when he actually comes out with his recommendations, I'm very intrigued, and we'll do a whole episode on that, because, like,
I'm like, is it going to be like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy different? Or is it going to be like, well, okay, that's kind of what.
Oh, he adjusted a few things.
Wow, okay.
He said
eat more vegetables. It's not like the guidelines don't say that already.
I know. And you sit there and go, the guidelines generally say, this goes into some of the, like, one of the things I will say that we can talk about in criticizing the current powers that be inside of the macro, that it is weird to me that there is some concern about how the food pyramid's set up, in the sense that the more and more we see the power of protein when it comes to hunger and satiety, when it comes to controlling calories better, it is annoying to me how we still do seem to undermine that on a macro level. The powers that be who recommend food choices, like, that's the give and take in general when it comes to meat is high in protein, but the downside, saturated fat. And so you gotta give and take and find unique strategies to do it. But it is weird to me how we still talk about the RDA for protein versus what the recommendation for the average American or average person should consume. The RDA is extremely low. And it's the RDA, and, like, we shouldn't even really be talking about the RDA in that situation, because the RDA versus what the clinical evidence suggests someone should actually consume it's a pretty friggin' big gap. And that's frustrating that, like, that's still not.
Right. And there are other issues with the current guidelines. I'm not saying they're all perfect, but I don't know that his are going to be perfect either.
Yeah. And telling people, that's one of the big things we got to do is we got to tell people to eat more saturated fat. It's just weird. Like, why? Out of everything you're going to say,
I think that's interesting.
I'm like, you could talk about omega-3 fatty acids, fish, olive oil. You could talk about
more salmon,
all this kind of stuff. And we're talking about saturated fat. Like, that's what we're going to talk about.
So stay tuned.
It'll be interesting.
We'll see what actually happens.
At the end of the day, going from the beginning of this, I don't think a lot of people actually listen to what the Health and Human Services recommends for food choices.
No one's doing that. So you think they're going to all of a sudden eat more vegetables because RFK said so?
Doubtful. But
if they do, great. Then I am glad he made a change.
Absolutely.
We shall see.
Well, we'll see what happens. As soon as they come out with their actual dietary guidelines, we will definitely be doing an episode.
We will be back.
All righty.
Part 1.
Have a good one.
Bye.